Right, it's the right time between the operational requirements and the administration's regulatory requirements that are more and more a constraint. Intrusive, and even some people might say around this table, hostile. Which solution should we go to without losing at best your soul and at worst your data and strategic assets? Are pure players like GCP, AWS, and Azure have a maturity that is such that they have become must-haves? This is what we'll be talking about, cloud computing concession or compromise, and we're going to be talking about this. Christophe Le Sur, you are a pre-sale Cloud Temple at Cloud Temple, which has hosting and management. Alain Bouillet is CEO of CESA, who's had a long career in cybersecurity. Hello, Alain. Julien Lévrard, who is IS citizen, is for OVH Cloud. Now, we don't introduce him, but they offer public and private cloud solutions. And finally, Charles Schulz, who is a Chief Strategy Officer at VETS, which is an open source solution publisher dedicated to virtualizing, and VETS, which is a 100% French company. So hello everyone, my name is Pierre-Alexis Saint-Michel. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and I'll be the moderator of this roundtable. We are on a subject that has to do with sovereignty. You've seen this European touch in this FIC 2022. It is therefore on purpose that this theme was proposed. It'd be good maybe to take stocks of what exists, a situation, operational situation that is business-oriented and more of a legal one. To start with this operation audit, if you wish, are all the companies on the cloud? Julien, I'll start with you, who maybe could tell us about the situation. Can we avoid going to the cloud? Well, all companies go to the cloud. A choice of rolling out a system that will not be in the cloud is a choice that is decided for specific reasons, and it is more of an exception. This is what we are seeing, because since we are selling cloud services, we see mainly cloud clients. Most of projects are cloud by design, and by default, it is the common practice. So we will say that companies should include the steering of the cloud strategy into the strategy, and it is the component by default. Even if a company decides not to go for the cloud and decides to not roll out its system infrastructure service or platform as a service, they will use subcontractors, service providers, or software solutions offered by partners who, in turn, are going to rely on the cloud. So even if you reject the cloud, you will end up with the data, the information, the workflows that will depend on cloud resources. So this is no fatality. The cloud provides a lot of new capacities and new qualities for company in terms of capacity to roll out infrastructures worldwide in a few minutes, to grow rapidly, to use standardized technology, to change quickly, to easily test, and have infrastructures at the blink of an eye. It is, of course, very strong for IT department, and we'll be talking about it, but it provides risks, constraints, and some aspects that should be taken care of in a full strategy, and not just have a technology approach or a product approach. Do you still have customers who say that to say, oh no, I will never go to the cloud, this is not my model? Well, we have customers who refuse to go to the cloud for certain projects and keep with their own data centers for sensitive processing, because culturally, some data for some companies and the culture of protection of data and the industrial secret makes it that companies would rather keep their own system, and sometimes for regulatory aspects, when we are talking about classified data, restricted data, or other references or regulatory requirements, we may be not in a position to use the cloud because it would be too expensive to comply with the requirements. But by default, when you have specific constraints today, it's cloud first. So cloud first for everyone. So we go for it in spite of a regulatory landscape that's very dense, and really there are regulations left, right, and center. On the second part of, before we get to the core of our topic, Alain, could you give us this legal landscape in Europe, of course, and also the international landscape? Well, if I started with a joke, we would say that the Americans have GAFAM, the Chinese have BHX, and Europe has GDPR. More seriously, when we look at these topics, and the CISO, who is consciously analyzing risks when the move to cloud is initiated, we were asking the members of the CESA a few years back, and we've been having this survey for 7 years, and we were asking questions about the move to cloud 7 years ago, and we still have a percentage of people who said 70% of the data the cloud, but not all of the data. But when you reached 100% of respondents who were telling us that they had some data in the cloud, we changed the question slightly differently on the percentage of the information wealth on the cloud. And here we're talking about close to 80% in certain areas. Let me come back to the risk analysis. When you have a risk analysis, and well, the caller, the choice very often is on hyperscalers and American clouds, and then we have immediately a number of regulations, and they invented extraterritorial laws. When you normally when you promulgate laws in a country, you do it for your own country, but not just the Americans do that, but they've invented some laws and they've given them nice laws, and I have to take notes because I can never remember them. The first one, or not the first one, there were others before, but the most popular one is the Patriot Act, which was invented by Mr. Bush in 2001, and there we were in a fight against terrorism. So we could think that these laws were going towards an objective that was really legit. The Patriot Act is very good for acronyms as well, because it's not Patriot Act, it's USA Patriot Act, and it means unifying and strengthening America by powering appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. So Patriot, that's what it stands for. So it means basically fighting against terrorism, but the twisting of these laws means that today this Patriot Act is translated by an authorization by American authorities to access data. You have to have a pretext, of course, obviously, a reason for that. And fighting against terrorism sometimes is a good excuse. Under this excuse, you can have an access to data located with American providers without the agreement of the host, and especially without notifying the owner of the data, which is in terms of action is quite. And they invented, if it was not enough, they invented the act the Cloud Act, and it's actually the O stands for overseas. So you allow American justice to constrain, I would say, force providers to supply data of people using the services, regardless of the location of this data. So this means that from the moment that you have an operator, an American operator, and I've got nothing against Americans, it's easier because there are less cases with the Chinese, but when you have an American operator who has a data center somewhere in the world, regardless of where the data center is, these laws apply. And therefore, when some announcements are made, and they're quite clever, Google made announcements about the opening of their data center of their cloud, Google Cloud France, actually is just Google data centers that are opened in France, but it's not because data centers are in France that they escape these laws.
There is pressure coming from the laws, and I think we'll come back to this later on. And I think this pressure is a key element that leads us to talk about sovereignty, trusted cloud, because if we were able to protect ourselves from those issues, we would have only one problem to solve: dependency. And that's a problem per se. We are not independent, and we also have to protect our data. That's why I think this is the right time to talk about it, because some announcements have been made or will be made. And one of their main goals is to protect data from what I call espionage permits. So we've talked about European sovereignty, and I know that this topic has been the theme of different roundtables. Does it have any meaning in practice? No, I don't think that European sovereignty exists. We have national sovereignty, but to me, sovereignty can only be national. But on the European scale, and to me, the objective we need to tend to is strategic autonomy. It's the conjugation, the addition of all of our sovereignties. So concretely, what does it mean? Well, we have legal issues, extraterritorial laws, and I think this is a major problem, and I think that people really have to understand what's at stake. The ecosystems need to understand this as well. But I think there is one remark I'd like to make. We need to support and be aware of the fact that in Europe, like in France, we have a full and entire ecosystem of companies that are services providers, software editors in the cloud. But there are different types of clouds: public cloud, hybrid cloud, private cloud, outside of the cloud. And all of those solutions are sufficient, necessary, so that they represent not the direct alternative. The goal is not to create a European Google or European cloud, but they are enough, sufficient, so that companies in Europe can remain performant, can bolster their digital transformation, and buy and use European tools. So we have a paradox: legal laws and the operational grounds. So we don't have any legal answers in Europe. I'm not saying that, but to me, we have GDPR, for example. Some will criticize GDPR, and to me, it is a high-value protocol. And to go back to the introduction and the joke that was said, we have regulations in Europe, and I think regulations are inefficient on the mid-term and the long term. Regulations are necessary, but are inefficient if we don't have ourselves a company ecosystem, an offer ecosystem that we control. Amazon will pay me for the number of people I'm going to train. So if I train 100 people, then I have a lot of money. There are big initiatives. So how can we compete with those initiatives? And we haven't talked about purely technological solutions yet. Is this marketing strength true, accurate? It's real. We need to be honest about this. When we talk about GAFAM actors, they are very strong from a commercial point of view, but it's also because we let them do it. Yes. And for a digital transformation program from a client, it can represent 200, 300,000 euros. And if a company has different needs, carve in, carve out, the evolution of an information system, when there is a real transformation project, yes, we can go in one of the two directions, but that's not the main issue. And I was quite surprised because we talk a lot about technological solutions. That's a good thing because we have a lot of technicians in the room. But for clients and prospects that we deal with, and with the maturity that we start to have on digital transformation pathways, everything starts with a discussion with people who are able to say, okay, I need this in terms of regulation, I need this in terms of operational efficiency, I need this technology. And so CISOs are able to offer them technical solutions to resolve those issues. We can have technologies coming from a sovereign French country, or we can have a Microsoft or Amazon platform which is quite efficient on this geographical area. And so they will be able to draft solutions that are compatible with people on the ground, and the company will then be able to advance its transition on the international level. And we're talking about rolling out a platform in Japan, which is scalable. The support that you're talking about can make a real difference. But in a company, when we're talking about a business process, it's quite infrequent. I'd like to add on what you've just said. European companies, French companies, like any other company, need the best in-class technologies. It's important to go faster, to be more efficient. This is a must-have. Otherwise, they'll disappear because companies will grow faster than them. But they also need to understand the technological challenges, who's writing the code, who is operating the code, who makes it work, what are the challenges, what decisions need to be made. And so to add on what Charles said earlier, we need all those technologies, and we also need American technologies. Today we use VMware, and so we integrate VMware bricks, and we use them in an operating sovereign mode. And OVH is using those bricks. We use our industrialization process to manage those bricks in a non-connected way. And then we ensure our clients that the operations are sovereign. And all clients can find advantages to the solutions that they'll find in the cloud. We need also to have a wide array of products to answer all the needs and to share a lot of data so that clients are able to make the right decision and to make sure that the products that we are going to offer them are well aligned on their ambitions and objectives, and all companies have different priorities. And do you think clients know what are the challenges to be faced, and do you think they are just going to focus on what they want to hear? I understand what you said, Christophe, on the positioning, on the fact that we really have to get aligned on the needs of the industry. People are in a rush, they want to go fast. I think that's the first role of the CIOs today. They need to learn how to use the tools that are at their disposal. We have frameworks, move to cloud frameworks, that are major, that share good explanations, and they help simplifying the approaches. If you start with the technical side, and for example, you can have a look at the technical side of things, do not start with the technical side of it. You need to talk with your people. And that's something that is quite forgotten because we focus on marketing. And as we said earlier, we want to take shortcuts. And I think that's the role of CIOs and CISOs. They really have a huge role to play and put things into perspective. Yes, those last 10 years, we've always bought the same solutions at the same time, Oracle, SAPs. All CIOs are copying the strategies from their colleagues and collaborators that they meet in seminars. And so we are signing contracts with Google and OVH and Amazon. We've been shown some curves, and unfortunately, we were disillusioned because we were sure that the tools would be flexible, but the promises in terms of savings, when you have a look at the barometer of Cézanne, when you have a look at the lists that needs to be addressed once you have moved to the cloud to protect your data, to answer the needs of authentication, project reinforced authentication. There are a lot of things that we hadn't predicted. Of course, some things were necessary when we are at the beginning of the project, but it was for sensitive data only. But there, when you expose your data in public clouds, then there's a lot of things that you have to implement that you didn't have to implement before. So what's the moral of the story? Then we had two phenomena. First, an increase in the invoicing for the cloud, because all the security tools that the CISOs have bought to secure the system were planned in the ROI that was presented to the board to make savings. And the second one, this is what I call the closing phenomenon. When you use Google or Microsoft 365, then even though you have legal specialists with provisions, you can't apply any clause that would make it reversible. If you're fed up with Google, you're going to go to Microsoft, and if you're fed up with Microsoft, you're going to go to Google. And we're talking about a 40% increase in the use of Microsoft licenses. So no savings. I was talking about security issues, and thanks to those issues, those forums can happen and people can live from this issue, but we need people to solve those issues. And indeed, there's a third phenomenon, the COVID phenomenon. Let's take Air France, where everyone is on temporary leave or temporary unemployed because the company cannot develop. First and foremost, when there are no flights anymore around the world, when the promise of the cloud is saying, okay, we can decommission this, but Air France had no idea if they would be able to start their activities again in 6 months, tomorrow, in 1 year. They had to stop develop the company for 6 months. And when the CISOs have received the bill, when people haven't used the machines, it was quite disturbing. So yes, we've observed those challenges in big companies because there are mass effects behind this. And indeed, I do not completely agree with you when you say that the users are the ones making the decision. It's true that there is a phenomenon according to which everyone is going into the same direction. It's true that because we don't have any other options available, so we need to work with GAFAMs. So let's talk about sovereignty now. Will I share my data and my critical assets to those companies? There are critical sectors, critical industries that promise not to expose their assets and are now using Gmail, and now nobody's talking about it, and that's a good thing. And it doesn't look like it's not working. There are encrypted solutions. On the European level, how will we respond to this alternative? Earlier, you were talking about what OVH is doing with the VMware environment. That's the OVH cloud solution. I think you have the same one, Christophe. At the European level, we've talked a lot about initiatives, legal perimeters, regulatory perimeters, Gaia X. I think Europe is able to draft laws. People can have meetings in Europe, but they are not ambitious enough. Gaia X is quite similar to Cloud X, things that were never implemented. So what can we do outside of the local initiatives, or should we still work with French companies hoping that they will be able to answer our cybersecurity needs on the European playground? I think there are intermediary steps. We're not going to blame the solutions. And it's working well. The question is not about whether it's working or not. It's working well. The problem is about how we are going to protect ourselves and from what. And if we are trying to protect ourselves from the curiosity of American agencies or laws I was talking about earlier, we see that they are emerging solutions. I was referring to Thales and Google, who are going to offer a mixed solution, which is quite similar to what my colleague said about INCYBER. We have Thales operating on Google Cloud, promising a secure cloud solution. What does it mean? Well, this is the most advanced security solution. The data from clients that will be hosted on those solutions, I don't have any auctions in Google or Thales, but our friends from Orange, Capgemini, will offer the same solution with Microsoft for the 365 part. And we would like to have sovereign solutions, but at least you were talking about big clients, and I know them well. Clients who decided to use the Microsoft 365. And when you are migrating your messaging system, you don't know what you are migrating. And so they are essential data, critical data in terms of espionage, especially in some companies. So if you have solutions that are encapsulated by French operators and that are protecting you from the curiosity of American agencies, then I think it's better than what we have today. It's not perfect yet, indeed, because we're still dependent. But those solutions will not make us less dependent from the American solution, but at least we'll be protected from the extraterritorial laws. So a good partnership between France and GAFAM, so a good partnership. But even though it doesn't solve the dependency issues, what about you? What do you think about it? Well, for dependencies first, Alain mentioned it, solutions offered by American services providers are working well. High performance, they're efficient, easy to roll out, and they were the first ones to start those solutions. That's why they are representing a big share of the market. Some companies want tools, and we are trying to convince them to find alternative solutions, but we can understand that they want a complete solution. Some companies will manage the data of millions of citizens. There are administrations that do have a responsibility, and we need those administrations to be brave and courageous. You can't choose a solution based on the fact that it's easier to use. It's much more than cost and easier views. What's going to happen with the data 10 years later? What about the relationship between the United States and the European Union? It might get tense. I hope it's not going to happen, but it could. We have administrations, agencies with a big societal responsibility, and they need to have a longer-term vision to help the ecosystem. Of course, we don't have the same abilities in terms of innovation. We can't compete with American actors. We're not on the same scale in terms of sizes as well. But if we don't have any orders, if European clients do not order their products in Europe, and if they are choosing American solutions, we won't be able to attract them again. We can't compete with them. I think we are lagging behind, and we are able to solve time. We need to answer the issues around sovereignty, about dependency, so that we can offer the right solutions to the market, so that we could also keep track with the GAFAM operators. And I think we'll be able to do that on certain points. But we need the market to trust us. We have high-quality services and products in Europe. We have a strong ambition, and we are tracking a high-performance ecosystem. We have 400 million companies with a lot of projects, and we need to trust them to leave this virtual cycle where American companies are having the monopoly. I think it's ironical to talk about American solutions that could be controlled through alliances. We've talked about some of them with Orange and a few others. I just wanted to share an example with you. I think it's not inevitable. We need American solutions. Yes. export 90% of our activity. And the first country we are working with is the United States. We are selling products to them and not the other way around. And then we have Germany, Sweden, some countries in Europe. And so I think there is a small issue in France. We talk a lot about sovereignty. But in the real world, people tend to be more conservative. They don't want to take risks. And if you don't take risks in the role of CISO, in the role of CIOs, it's about not deviating from the solution that is used in majority of the cases by the majority of people, and that's why we are a digital colony. But when we go to Germany, to England, to Italy, we're not welcomed in the same way. I'm not saying that there are no American actors, but they don't have the majority here. And I think we have a full potential to get deployed. Yes, but that doesn't solve the issue of sovereignty, European sovereignty. It just helps your company develop. I have another example to share with you. Today, we're talking about Gaia X. I don't want to criticize that project. I think that there are necessary things. I think we are part of a company who left Gaia X because it was not interesting for us, and so we decided to meet other industrial groupings with European actors that do want to promote their solutions. The first group, for example. And the reality of things is that it is absolutely vital to use and to let solutions that are developed in Europe grow and be used. Young people leaving the university have been trained with those tools. And the money that is put on the table, in terms of amounts, we share a lot of money for trainings. Amazon sponsors universities and schools, and the underlying idea being that once a young professional arrives on the market, knows what are the tools, Azure, for example. And I think it's interesting for companies afterwards. And so they are focusing on trainings. European actors need to strengthen their approach in that sense. And the second point I wanted to talk about, if we have a look at public markets, and more specifically the way CDPs are drafted, incentives to use sovereign technologies, European technologies, it's quite limited. To conclude, for example, it would be great to have it, but it's not mandatory. And so, in what schools are you present and what certifications are you delivering? We are working a lot with the universities on values. We decided to focus on university because I had myself a university pathway, and we wanted to focus on transformation and what does it mean, because young people do not really have the opportunity to discover the technologies, open source systems or American systems. We give them the opportunity to try new systems. And I think that the new generation leaving the university is a pillar, and we really need to focus on this pillar. We need to invest in this pillar collectively, the society as well, because I think you remember the war that we had with Novotel and Microsoft won the war with Active Directory and Windows because they massively invested in trainings. And I think we should do the same.
I knew I didn't have the whole morning to make a presentation on the legal panorama. I went to the main aspects, but there may be an American law to mention at this stage is the Small Business Act. The Small Business Act actually is a law that more or less obliges the American administration, at least, to buy American products. Now, if GAFAM develops so much in Europe and elsewhere, it's mainly because the Americans bought massive solutions and allowed companies to develop and to do what we know today. So we are great in Europe, very gifted to have balls and chains. I mean, I worked for Caisse des Dépôts for 20 years. You can believe me, we have so many hurdles in terms of public procurement. Each time, we had the results before we even published the offers. So I think that there is a true topic. We will not solve everything through regulatory questions. We talked about the GDPR earlier on. I'm still expecting the equivalent of GDPR for sensitive data. If we had done a true regulation, it's not just the personal data that are sensitive in companies. Even some personal data have no interest whatsoever. But sensitive areas such as the manufacturing secrets who are not personal data are not protected by any law. So we have some loopholes in terms of legislation for the protection of non-sensitive data on the obligation that at least the administration, the French administration, buys as a priority some French product. It's totally at the opposite of the European Commission, but at one point we'll have to change this state of mind, because otherwise, what you call them the people who always go for the sample, always make the same purchase at the same time. Otherwise, the followers will continue following and buying massively some foreign products. And at the end, the BATX still a lot of possibilities. Then we're talking about exporting, but Vates provide the infrastructure software to provide a number of services with a host. We've identified the Franco GAFAM with Orange and Thales, who actually piggyback. But couldn't you imagine some bricks where each in Europe will build its own bricks? Vates is a brick, GAIX, OVH another brick, Cloud Sample, and so on. And from a patchwork, we could consolidate a solid offer. It would be ideal. Now, with a nuance, is that I believe in the efficiency of cooperation. And therefore, it's not just us, but it could be other players. And you have to leave the choice to people. That would be idea. And we called Vates for, we are called actually Vates, which is an old Gaulish thing to talk about the oracle. It's also, and then this is said by Chief Strategy Officer. GAIX is not a brick. It's going to give a reference, a number of criteria to tag these bricks, and therefore classify them, assess them, compare them. And therefore, it is a tool that facilitates the consumption of cloud services, reversibility, and going from one service to another. But it is an approach that goes in the right direction. And tomorrow the cloud will be more and more useful, and it should be able to go from a cloud provider to another very easy. We have to standardize APIs, interfaces, all technologies to be in a position to go from one to another and allow to have more choice for customers and more capacity to actually go from multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and offer the various services with European clouds or American ones. So some people do business with the Americans, so they should have a cloud. Do you think we could play in the cloud just like you do the SOC? We used to have another for something that is less sensitive, and we used to change reversibility, something that is not complicated. We design our products in that way, and we fight actively against all those devices that create locks. So, of course, talking about technology and standards and so on, we've been working quite well, so we can go for workload from one cloud provider to another, no problem. But we have a number of technology bricks that are underlying to the use of the cloud that you have the IAM orchestration and so on. We can easily be stuck in the cloud provider context if we don't take open. So cloud equals automation. So the mechanics they will allow us to switch, as you said, from one environment to the next. And the best advice to give to people who are here or users: do not lock yourself in a technology like Microsoft or Google. You have a whole set of tools that make your life simpler, and once you've created your 1,000 lines of code of automation with that tool, switching from one to the next. So whether you're using Cloud Temper or VH, we have APIs that allow you to be agnostic on that. So these tools, as an example, allow you to pilot Amazon and Google and have some as code infrastructure that are agnostic.
Peut-être rentrer sur des derniers mots, sur un peu de perspective. Pour chacun d'entre vous, en 2 minutes, c'est quoi les perspectives du cloud?
So in a few minutes, what are the perspectives or the prospects of the cloud in the years to come? You were talking about the infrastructure as a code. It'd be interesting for the possible immigration. It could be something that would be major for security, because they have some documented aspects, and you can run some security tests as well. It's also some sources of savings as well, and not working on repetitive tasks for humans. I mean, at Cloud Tempo is that you don't click, or the image of the Linuxo engineers of 15 years ago would connect to have an action, manual action that's forgetting to document it. This is something that will not be, from our point of view, a thing of the past. Alain, what does the future look like? Well, actually, it is the topic of December convention, is to think about looking forward at 2025. When we look back and at what happened over the last 10 years, there are many things that had not been planned. So maybe it's a bit dangerous to look and to predict the future, but I think we'll come back to more balanced situations. I have respondents to my survey who say that sometime we are at 99% of data in the cloud, in the public cloud. We actually didn't talk about that private and public cloud, but the private cloud is virtualizing your data centers, so it's at your place or not, it's yours. So this means that maybe we'll come back to, in my opinion, a better balance between private cloud and public cloud, and maybe a better balance in the technology choices. Maybe not put all our eggs in the same basket compared to what we've been doing over the past 10 years. And by this I mean that we have to diversify, go towards OVH rather than always going to the same Amazon, And all this portfolio, the company actually today is not in a cloud, but in several clouds. There's no other choice. So, for having tested myself and listening to my members, multi-cloud is a bit of a nightmare, because beyond the topics of contracts and ping-pong of responsibility, we will have to play with that and have at the same time a better control over agility, the best technology, and the costs that remain reasonable, so that we're no longer stuck with the same providers, small number of providers that have incredible prices, and also security that is more, how am I going to put it, inside security. 86% of my respondents, when I asked them whether do you trust the security tools offered by cloud providers, 90% say no, I buy an extra solution. And this is why the wealth of the cyber market today, if the GAFAM produced all the security solutions to secure data, we would not have 500 exhibitors here in Lille. We would have 4. So this wealth of security should be, you have to rethink your security architecture, because there's something that is looming on us by 25, is that a world with several internets. The fact that we can see today that there is an internet of the Western world, and then you have the Chinese one, you have the Russian one, and when you are companies, global companies, how do you update these countries? So we'll have to make do with a world that is going to be scattered. The world where everyone was connected to the same network in the years 2000, I think, is over now. Julien? The basic technology, whether to run instances, storing objects, or running containers, is getting more and more trivial. A lot of players can build a small Amazon. It's accessible for a startup. The technology, there hasn't been an advance or standard technology of the main players that is significant. So this means that today the competition has moved to the specific characteristics, either in terms of scale, worldwide, if you need to enormous scale-up requirements, only global players can act, or some regulatory specificity, or the capacity to add bricks and features and solutions from a number of publishers that are more or less compatible with the technology. And the fight today is no longer on the basic technology, it's going to be the same everywhere, just like a commodity, really, a very trivial commodity without specific added value. But the strength of the technology will depend on the ecosystems built on that and the business capacity that the various ecosystems will allow for their customers. And I think that the fight will be on additional solutions and ecosystems more than basic technology. Vates. So, talk about prospects and outlook. I'd like to look back, because there was a major American company called Sun Microsystems, for those who remember, and Sun is the first company to have went to the cloud and talk about it. They didn't use cloud. They talked about grid computing. So there's a kind of network infrastructures. Why am I talking about this? Because today we've seen that, and then there are true differences between public, private, and hybrid cloud. I don't know whether it's going to be rebalanced, but at least it'll be clearer. And what we'll see, and it's all been true, and it's be even more true today, is that the cloud is a continuum between what we had before, the public cloud, what you can have in private cloud, what you can do in on-premise, because we actually only touched on it, but there's still a lot of on-premise resources that are in physical places that are identified by customers. And what is coming with the strength that we can find is what we call edge computing. Edge computing is just digitalizing the last mile, if you wish, at the very end of the production chain. Before that, nothing was connected. You could have SCADA, Internet of Things, bridges, loads of different systems, electronic, mechanical system. Now you've got the IT coming. And this IT is connected to a network. Now, is it connected to a cloud public? It's not, generally not, but many things already exist. Very clearly, anyway, it's connected to a network of private cloud. And what I see that we've been seeing at the VATES is this trend to have a continuum where everything's connected, and in which it is, of course, essential to have a good security policy, good strategy of portability, management of data, but of course, a true reflection, a true planning in terms of sovereignty of our infrastructure. Thank you very much. We have come to the end of this roundtable. Do you have a question to ask our guests around the table? The first question is always the most difficult one. Well, I will ask the first one then. Are new players going to emerge that could replace GAFAM, or that could come to the market through the positioning that could become a bit look a bit baroque, but would be legit players tomorrow? Well, yes, I will not give names, but I'm thinking about a number of existing players who are good size, but you don't necessarily see them as a cloud players. And that could potentially be significant again with the evolution described. So a growing space devoted to not public cloud, but distributed IT resources. And these players could actually take this turn on over GAFAMs. Now, not necessarily I can't see the GAFAM disappearing, but I've noted with a number of other people that there are today a tidal waves that consist in leaving the GAFAMs, because we are talking about large names. You all know about Dropbox. Dropbox, I don't know who they were with, but they were with Amazon, AWS. Dropbox has left AWS, not for Azure or for GCP. No. They actually built their own data centers. And what they actually saw from an accounting point of view is, by mastering, controlling the data centers, all the margin that they needed to continue and be more competitive reappeared. Now, I don't want people to be mistaken. I'm not saying that cloud is bad. All I'm saying is that there is a model for the consumption of cloud that is relevant. It may be the only model for everyone. Public cloud equals cheaper is totally wrong. The public cloud could be, in such a situation, cheaper, especially when you're working on you know how it goes, shit in, shit out. So if it's big and bulky on-premise, is going to be big and bulky in public cloud. Thank you very much for this word conclusion. Thank you for all panelists, and we are available if you have a couple of questions on one-to-one. And thank you very much for taking part, and have a nice week.